So I'm going to throw a photo up here, which I hope you can all see. So this is the new addition to our family. So Wally, well, we're calling her Aunt Wally. We're not sure how much of an auntie she's going to be because she's aptly named. For those that don't know, Wally is a Labrador, and she is a bit of a Wally. She's beautiful. She was not sure what to do when she saw this little one, but they're becoming really good friends. And can I assure you that this little one gives as good as she gets. So she's a foxhound, so she's going to grow quite big. Those of you who know my previous dog, Anzac was half foxhound, so she'll be pretty big. Anyway, she's lovely. She's only 8 weeks old, so she's pretty little. But I thought, you know, pets, family values. Pets are one of our family values. Yeah, really. Have a pet. Yep, pets are works for so many people. Can I just say that there's a reason they use pets as therapy. It's because animals are really good. The right animal. Not sure Wally's are really useful pets as therapy. Actually, Brian's probably told you, but it's really funny. When he walks with his cane, a number of people think that Wally's a guide dog. Now, those of you that have met Wally know how ridiculous that would be. But anyway. So, we can probably take that gorgeous puppy photo down, or everyone will be distracted. So we're talking about family values, and so Adrian pretty much asked me to talk about some of the values we had in our family growing up and to think about how those values impact life and family. Now, obviously I have kids, so some of those family values will relate around that, but the principles are pretty much the same, regardless of whether the relationship is with kids or with other people. That a lot of the principles are still there. So the first thing that really came to my mind when I talked about that, when I thought about family values, is that every individual in the family is unique, and every individual in the family of God is unique, and each person is an incredible masterpiece. And we know that really well-known verse. Thought it would be really good to have some scripture on a Sunday morning. I don't know about you, but I thought it was a good idea. Yeah. Starting Ephesians 2, verse 8, God saved you by his grace when you believed, and you can't take credit for this. It's a gift from God. Salvation is not a reward for the good things you have done, so none of us can boast about it, for we are God's masterpiece. He has created us anew in Christ Jesus, so we can do the good things he planned for us long ago. And one of the things I think that's important to me is that each person in the family is unique. Now, Brian and I made a decision, you know, a long time ago to marry and to have children, but our children didn't get a say in that, right? They just arrived. And I think as a family, our responsibility is to really help our children understand how unique and how precious and how special they actually are. The thing is, though, that sometimes life tarnishes the masterpiece. Have you ever noticed, who's been to see, you know, masterpieces at the gallery and stuff like that? Brian and I recently went to one in Canberra called From Botticelli to, was it like Van Gogh or Monet or something like that. And so it had these masterpieces throughout the ages, and, you know, some of them are 500 and 600 years old. And over time, they're still a masterpiece, but they gain a bit of tarnish, they gain a bit of wear. And I forgot to send the photo through, but I found a photo, and it's one of those classic photos from the Renaissance era, and I think it was a Botticelli, and it was a picture of the Madonna and Child. And, you know, a lot of art around that time was around that. And they showed this picture as it was received, and then they showed the picture as it had been restored. And I started thinking about this whole masterpiece. Life tarnishes us as masterpieces. Stuff goes on and stuff happens, but that doesn't mean we're not a masterpiece. The stuff in our life that happens, our kids, stuff happens with our kids. Things go wrong, they don't always do what we want. In fact, most of the time they don't do what we want, you know, because they're little human beings and they're little masterpieces. And sometimes stuff happens in our lives and our masterpiece gets tarnished for whatever reason. But the thing about being the masterpiece is that we have a master restorer, and we have someone who can actually restore and make new again. And so this picture that I found, you could see the difference. There was so much more clarity of picture once it had been restored. Restoration takes time, and it takes patience. My not so favourite word, because patience is, it's a tough one sometimes, isn't it? But in our family, we are the masterpieces that God is restoring in our lives. And sometimes we have to be patient and let God restore. I can't restore the things that I perceive to be wrong with Brian. Not that many, but I can't restore his eyesight. I can't make him a better person because he's not me. Right? There are things that I actually can't do. But as a masterpiece, the artwork might be damaged, but God's loving restoration brings it to life. And I actually think that in our families, when stuff happens with our kids, as parents, we can emulate what God does and be that loving restorer in their lives. When our kids were growing up, one of the things I always wanted, and I'm not sure how well we did it, but one of the things that I always wanted to do was make our home kind of a refuge for our kids and our family, where our masterpieces could be carefully restored if they'd had a bit of a rough day somewhere at school or around the place, and they happen. Sometimes it was the parents that had had a rough day at work or, dare I say, at home with the kids, and sometimes life can be really, really difficult. But we wanted our place to be a place where the masterpieces could be restored and where there was a lot of grace and a lot of love. So I think for me that really underpins everything that we did as a family, was acknowledging the individualness of our family and trying to make our home, so whether it's a home of one or whether it's a home of, some families have mum, dad, grandparents, grandkids, aunts and uncles all thrown in. Is it a place where there's grace? Is it a place where there's love? Is it a place where there's a refuge from a world that can get pretty difficult at times? And so that was one of the key things that we had, that each person is a unique individual, and we wanted to treat them as a unique individual. So the second thing I wanted to take from that was this notion of training up a child. Proverbs 22:6 says, "Train up the child in the way they should go. When they're old, they won't depart from it." The NLT version says, and I really like this, "Direct your children onto the right path, and when they are older, they will not leave it." See, our role as parents and also as friends, if we're working with our friends, is not to force them into a particular path or force them into a particular way, but to direct how they go. And when they're little, they need more direction than when they're older. A very small child needs quite a bit of direction and encouragement. I love watching Rach and Josh with Benny, because their parenting is so soft and generous, but you can also see the loving grace. But I did have to laugh the other day. We were down the beach, and Rach wanted Benny to come. Benny was in a bit of a, digging a hole in the sand. Rach wanted Benny to come. When she called him, and a lot of children, and sometimes a lot of people do this, he deliberately turned his back on her and kept on doing what he was doing. And I took a picture, and I'd love to title it, "Benny Not Doing What He Was Asked to Do." But that's really typical of a child, so you guide and direct them. And I want to point out here that because we are unique, the way we guide and discipline and train has to be unique to the child. Not every child is the same. Most of you know my kids, Liz, Josh, Tom. Now, they are all very different people. Very different people. And it's been a journey raising each one of them, mostly in a really good way. As a family, we went through some stuff that you can ask me about later, some health issues and things that weren't easy for the kids or the family. But through all of that, one of the things we tried to do was guide and direct them, because discipline, and I'm not talking about punishment, I'm talking about discipline, teaching our kids how to be disciplined people, teaching our kids how to have an internal locus of control not an external locus of control. When our kids are little, they need a bit of an external locus of control. You can't just leave your toddler by the swimming pool and expect that they're going to stay where you left them. Toddlers just don't do that. Okay, so you need some external control around that child. But as that child grows, the hope and the plan is that as they learn and grow, that internal discipline becomes. So an adult, you can say, stand by the side of the pool, and hopefully they won't move, you know? Like, okay, so I know some adults that would deliberately dive into the pool, probably me included, but, you know, that internal locus of control is what stops us from getting into a whole lot of mess when we have that internal locus of control. So we worked on this idea of the same principle, but different outcomes. Even like little things, right? So time out for kids. Our time out was always they go to the bedroom. It's their own safe place, but they knew that they were in there because something had happened that wasn't right. When they came out, Josh and Liz, we'd sit them down and we'd say, now, do you understand what happened? This is classic parenting stuff, right? Do you understand why you were sent to your room? And they'd be able to tell me. And not so Tom. Send Tom to the room. A couple of times I heard an awful ruckus. One time he'd pulled his... he decided he was angry with me for sending him to his room, so he opened up all his drawers, pulled them all out, and of course the whole thing fell on top of him. But I would send him there, and I asked the same question. Now, do you remember why you went to your room? No? No clue, no idea, because that was gone, and now we're somewhere else. And so we had to adjust what we did. And it's the same with all of our family. You adjust how you respond to a person in a way that fits their uniqueness, in a way that works with them. And so one of the things that, and I was chatting to some of our women about this the other day, when we're training our children, I want us to understand that our relationship with our children is more important than the discipline that we give them. Does that mean discipline isn't important? No, it just means that the relationship we have with them, and can I say the relationship we have with other members of our family and our friends, is actually more important than what we think that they're doing right or wrong. Because when it comes to family relationships, and again I talk here about our kids, what is more important is that I have a relationship with that child, because their trust in me as a parent and their love for me and my ability to discipline them comes out of that relationship, not the other way around. If I'm constantly discipline, that child doesn't build a relationship with me. That child builds frustration. That child builds an internal anger. That child begins to feel that they're not valued. I'm not saying we did this perfectly, by the way. I'm pretty sure we stuffed, actually, I'm going to ask Liz later, I'm pretty sure we stuffed up badly on some of these. But as I reflect on it, the thing that is really important is that the relationship that we have is more important than the discipline. And true obedience comes from that point of relationship. When a child can trust you and know that you want the best for them, when you say to them, don't run across that road, age appropriate, they know that you're doing it for a reason and not just to be difficult. They know that and they understand that you love them and that you care for them. Because discipline comes from a place of relationship, I want us to think about how we build that relationship. Our kids follow what we do. I know it's that saying, children do what they see rather than what you say, but it's actually true. Children, we model what the children are going to do. And I used to be amazed at the number of mums who would be sitting at playgroup. So we're talking about children 2, 3, 4, maybe 5, sitting at playgroup. This was before Tom, because when we had Tom, we had to leave playgroup for a few reasons, but you can ask me about that later. But one of the things that we found really interesting at playgroup was that the kids would come by and a kid would swear, and their parents would go, I don't know where they picked that up from. And then the kid would go off and you'd hear the parents say, oh, the big idiot, you know. I'm pretty sure I know where they picked that swear word up from. But the funny thing was, it was amazing how many of them thought their kids had picked it up at preschool. We had parents that, and look, their swearing didn't bother me, but it's just kids will do what they see. Kids will model what they see. And so in our relationships, what are we modelling? What are we modelling to other people? What are we modelling in our families, in our extended families, in our church families? What kind of modelling are we doing that's positive for our kids? I was thinking about some of this as well. I was talking about the rod. You know, there's the old thing, spare the rod and spoil the child. Our kids, when they were little, did get smacked a couple of times, I have to admit. But I look at that now and I go, actually, if you spare the rod and spoil the child, wasn't actually about smacking the kid. The rod was actually used to prod a sheep in the right direction. It wasn't used to smack the sheep over the head or on the rear end or do any of that. And so I think as the kids got older, we kind of went, oh, hang on, that's not really an appropriate thing, because the rod was something that the shepherd held to direct the sheep in the right direction and to move it away from danger. And so as we look at our kids and as we work with them, I want to encourage us to find ways where we direct and prod the child in the right direction. Or with our friends, maybe you encourage them by prodding them in the right direction, remembering that they are responsible for their own behaviours. I was thinking about this idea of learning from others and being prodded in the right direction. And when I was a kid, my grandfather owned a boat. In fact, he owned a couple of boats because his brother was a boat builder. And we lived really close to the Georges River and Botany Bay. And we often went out on the boat and we often went fishing. And we also, when we went on holidays, went fishing. And I don't remember someone saying to me, right, we're going to have a lesson now on how to fish. First of all, you need to go and buy whatever it is. And you know, it just didn't happen that way. It wasn't a step-by-step manual. It was alongside my grandfather or my dad or whoever was with us, watching what they did, learning from them. Did they help us? Of course they did. Did they teach us how to tie knots? Yes. But they showed us how to do it. They didn't just say, this is how... And so we learnt by watching what they did. We learnt... Look, some other members of the family have more patience for fishing than I do, can I say? You know, fishing perhaps isn't my most favourite sport, but I know how to, you know, put a hook and a sinker on a line. I know how to catch a fish. I know how to unhook a fish. I know how to gut a fish. Like, in fact, one of the great things I did with my kids is I bought a whole mullet and I said, right, kids, we're going to learn how to gut a fish. I don't know if the kids remember it, but they were pretty grossed out at the time. Anyway, sometimes things just take a little while to get out of the system. But we started young. I don't remember a time when I didn't go out on the boat with my grandfather. So we started young, and I learnt. And when I got squirted by an octopus, they didn't get cross with me for catching the octopus. They just cleaned me up afterwards, you know, and said, let's try again. Yeah, mess is going to happen. You're going to get... Thankfully, the octopus squirted water, not ink, over me, because that would have been really disgusting. But, you know, here I am, this great octopus. Catching octopus is pretty clever. But, yeah, it just squirted water like all over me. But, you know, everyone just got alongside and said, OK, you know, here's a clean jumper, there, wrap a towel around you. Now, let's try again. Let's see if we can catch a flathead, hey? You know, it wasn't, oh, dear, you got hit by, you know, an octopus and you shouldn't have been there. And if you'd just gone the other way and if you'd been on the other side of the boat, blah, 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 blah. Which as parents is sometimes what we do. We kind of blame the kids for something that is not their fault. And I'm sure we've all done that. And I'm sure my kids could tell you times when they've done that. But my little phrase here is we are a guide for our children. We're not a straitjacket for them. We're a guide. You know, we're a guide for them. And so it was the same principles, but individual application. And it's really, when I think of all of this, I think of the train up a child. How do we actually do that in a way that is really helpful? And I just think when we train up a child, we take it more than just the faith. We take it more than just, take responsibility for your actions. It's about who they are individually. What are the gifts and talents that they have? Help them and encourage them and guide them in a way that is going to work with who they are as a child, not who I think they are. I used to love swimming. None of my kids are great swimmers. In fact, some of them positively hate the water. And I used to compete in swimming, and I loved the surf. I did try and encourage them to go there, but it wasn't the right fit for them. And so you've got to draw back and say, I'm not living my life through them. They have to live their own life. They have to be the individual that God's called them to be, and I have to give them space to do that. And by the way, giving people space to be who they are goes for husbands and wives and friends and everyone we have. We can't control who they are. I think I'm running a little bit short on time, but I do want to get Liz up here and have a little bit of a chat about growing up in our family, because I figure, you know what? I can say what I like, but maybe get it out of the mouth of someone who did actually grow up in our family. So, Liz? Cool. So, Liz, you spent around about, was it 21 years or so?
21 and a half years to the day.
Living in our family?
That's right.
Yeah. So, highlights. What was something that you think we did really well?
In 21 years. Oh, my goodness. Well, I think the what you were talking about with the encouraging us to be individual and not the one-size-fits-all solution for everyone was a really strong part of it. And like when I look back on, to be honest, like it's 21 and a half years is a lot of minutes and hours, but I remember not heaps and heaps of things because, you can't remember all of that. It would you just couldn't remember all of that. And so when you were speaking, I was trying to think of examples. I'm like, gosh, I don't remember so many. But I remember so clearly, I did artistic roller skating for a number of years, about 8 years, I think. And a lot of the time, because, roller skating rinks kept shutting down, as one currently is at the moment, actually. But roller skating rinks kept getting shut down, and we'd have to travel distances to go and actually train. Not too bad, but Dad used to take me up on a Saturday morning to Woonona while Mum was running the other boys around to their different sports.
Cricket and soccer?
Soccer and cricket. And Dad used to always sing random songs with me on the way up and back to sort of kill the time. But like looking back now, that's one of my favourite memories. And it's just, or he would we'd talk about maths, and he would, I remember going to school one day already knowing how to do something because he had taught me how to do maths. And like those sort of things are the things I remember, like just understanding what I was interested in or really stressed about at one time. At particular times, and coming alongside and encouraging me through that and in that and helping me learn, life values from that. I do actually remember one time when I was about year 10 and just so stressed about an assignment that I had. I don't remember what the assignment was, but I was so stressed about it. And I remember, Mum and Dad were just really good in that and teaching me things that I could do and getting support where I needed support. And yeah, and I still now, I am currently doing a course where I just want to achieve really well, and so I stress heaps about it. And I still go back to times like that and trying to, work through some of those strategies I learnt back then. So I guess you were just really good at recognising what we were going through, who we were as people, and encouraging us in that, supporting us in that, getting us extra help or support if we needed that. I think that, yeah.
Brian was more patient to teach the maths, can I just say?
He was very good at teaching maths.
I would just get so frustrated, so Brian was actually the better one. Really glad I didn't have to homeschool any children. So growing up, we tried to create a culture of, I guess, love and grace and forgiveness and some of those things. I remember you saying to me one time, I must have been really frustrated by something, and I chucked my keys on the floor really, really hard. And I remember you saying to me that was the only time that you were ever slightly afraid. Do you remember that situation?
Maybe.
Yeah.
Yeah, I remember a couple of times when you were frustrated
Yeah.
and angry, but I mean, they were the exception rather than the rule, for sure.
See, we're not perfect. One of the interesting things about that, from what I remember, is Liz mentioned it a little while later, and we were able to have a conversation around the fact that I wasn't angry with them. I was frustrated with myself, and I hadn't chucked the keys at them. They'd gone hard onto the floor. But it was actually about, me having to learn to take responsibility for my own anger and my own frustration. The kids do stuff that is not right sometimes, but I'm still responsible for how I respond to them. A couple of times you've talked about that whole taking responsibility thing as one of the things you remember. Do you want to talk a bit about that?
All the time when I was younger, and I say it to my kids all the time because it's so ingrained in me. When they say, this person made me do it, and I'm like, no, they didn't. You're the only person who can make yourself do anything. Because Mum said it to me so many times growing up. Never, ever forgotten it. And it's true, you can feel angry or cranky or whatever about what someone has done to you, but that doesn't mean that when you lash back, that's their fault necessarily. Your reaction is always your responsibility.
Yeah. So we tried to help our kids take responsibility because, Tom was diagnosed with ADHD when he was about 8, and it's really hard for ADHD kids to take responsibility for what they do because they're so very, very impulsive. But we never let him use that as an excuse. We would say to him, we understand that it's harder for you, but you've still got to learn. He's still got to learn to gain that internal locus of control. And it's not easy for kids like that, and they carry that into adulthood and they learn to find ways around it. But that's one of the things that we think about was, that just in case you're wondering with this kind of thing, we take responsibility for our own actions and we are responsible toward other people. So not for other people, but toward other people for how we treat them. And so we treat them with love and respect and kindness. We are not responsible for how they behave, because they have to take responsibility for their own behaviour. And that was something that we talked a lot with as kids. Anything you think we got badly wrong, or something that you've changed in the raising of your own kids?
Honestly, not
okay.
really.
You can share.
No, I honestly can't think of anything. I mean, I can recognise in myself when I am doing some of those things you were just talking about, like when I am taking up my stress and frustration on the kids when I'm raising them. But, I mean, yeah. I think what really opened my eyes in a way to how you can help guide your kids in, the right way was when we had my foster brother come and live with us for a while. And I was at that point, how old was I? 17. And so I was able to see a lot of those principles in action. And I guess I could see, where things went well or things that could have been done better in that situation. And that's actually really helped me now as I parent my own kids as well. Like seeing that from, it wasn't quite an adult, but almost an adult's perspective really helped as well. So I can't think of anything that went terribly wrong. I think you always took responsibility when, you lost it or got cranky. And I try to do the same thing with my kids too, so...
Yep. Yeah. And one of the things that we tried really hard to do was to apologise for the kids when we'd stuffed up, because they've got to know that we're not perfect. They've got to know that we make mistakes, but it's really important that they know that, because otherwise they can go through life just thinking that, parents are perfect or they never apologise. And so that was something that I took from my own family, that it was really important to apologise for the kids, to the kids, when we'd stuffed up. Yeah. We're probably out of time, but thanks, Liz, for coming and sharing it. If you want to know any more of the dirt on our family, Tom's probably the one not to ask because he doesn't remember. Josh, perhaps. Josh will know. Josh will know. Josh will know indeed. But I just want to encourage us as we wind up that in our relationships, put the relationship before the other stuff, because the other stuff comes from that relationship that you have. And in our relationships that we have with people and with families, and if we don't have kids ourselves, then we are a kid of someone, so we've been in a family somewhere. If you've been damaged by that family, because that happens, can I just encourage you to seek the help you need, whether that be psychological help, mental health, emotional health, whatever it is that you need to do. And can I also ask you to maybe bring that before God and just ask him to be the restorer of the masterpiece that you are? Because we know that stuff happens, but God restores. And God restores families, and God restores so many things that we just can't do ourselves, and let him do that work. Sometimes he will say to you, go and find a really good counsellor. Go and find a good psychologist. Go and see a psychiatrist. And sometimes he'll just say, come and sit in my presence for a while. Can I just encourage you to do what you need to do? Because you're important, your masterpieces, and your family. So let's finish. So if you've struggled with some of this, please feel free to come and chat to us later, because we do have things in place that we can help you with as well. And if you don't know Jesus, can I encourage you to talk to a friend who does, and just learn what it is to really be a follower of Jesus. I'm just going to pray. Father, we thank you that you place the lonely in families, and that your family is the most important family. We thank you, Father, that you have given us family here, and we don't get it right all the time, but Father, that you love us. And Father, I pray for each person who is here that is struggling with something that might come from their life, that's where their masterpiece has been tarnished, that Lord, that your patient hand of restoration would be upon them, bringing them to wholeness and bringing them to the beautiful masterpiece that you have in mind. Amen.